Welcome to this week's episode of the First Moves podcast. This week we're talking to Bart Hendriks, American football coach of the Maastricht Wildcats and defensive back coach of the American football national team here in the Netherlands. In this episode we'll be discussing how he built up the Maastricht Wildcats from nothing to now playing in the first division and how his leadership on and off the field has influenced him personally. If you'd like to see the parallels between leadership in sports and leadership in business, this episode is for you. So please give it a listen. Thank you. Welcome to the podcast, Bart.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Very happy to have you on. Could you maybe start by introducing yourself and telling a little bit about your background and how you got into coaching American football?
My name is Bart. I've been living my whole life here in Maastricht. That's where I started playing football with some friends when I was, I think, 15, 16 years old, so a lifetime ago. At some point, I have a little genetic disorder that makes my cartilage very weak. So at some point, my doctor told me, like, hey, maybe football isn't for you because you'll get hit a lot. And if you get hit from the waist down, you're going to be paralyzed. It's like, ooh, that sounds serious. But up to that point, I'd done pretty much every sport you can think of. And football was the only thing that really would let me have my passion. It had the right combination of being physical, but also being mentally very tough. There was a lot of tactics, which I really enjoy. So I couldn't keep away from the field. And slowly my coaches at the time, two American guys, they saw that. So they started just asking me to help out. It started with just, being a ball boy or stuff like that. But pretty quickly they noticed I also knew all the stuff everybody needed to know. So they asked me to coach the juniors. That's where I started with. And I think every year my role expanded till eventually I became the defensive coordinator's assistant. So I was helping mostly on that side of the ball. And then after we won our last national championship in 2011, the team started falling apart. We had veterans. They were like 30-something years old. They're like, good moment to stop, as a champion. Some mercenary players who came around just to get a championship. So they had to restart. That year wasn't very successful. And then the club basically fell apart. And we left. I think we had 3 or 4 members left on the team. The then owner of the team asked me, do you still want to continue this? I was like, well, I don't like traveling that much, and I love the sport, and I would hate to see a sport that at that point I played for, I think, 6-7 years, just die out in Maastricht. So I basically kept continuing and became the head coach, and that's where the journey kind of started for the rebuild of the Wildcats.
So maybe just for the listeners who are not super familiar with American football, could you quickly explain what the game is about?
Usually the quote I like to say to people at the first time they ask is, it's basically like playing chess, but you're allowed to hit each other. You have a team, you have your... usually in the Netherlands you have about 30 players on a team. You create an offense out of that. That's when you have the ball and you're just trying to score points, and you have a defense who's trying to stop that. Because of how specialized the sport is, you have a lot of different positions. So in a team, you can see a guy who's maybe like 5'4", but he's just quick, and he's on the same side as a guy who's like 6'9", 300-something pounds, and they can play the same sport. So it's a fun combination of that helps when you want to have these different tactics because you adjust to who you have. And that allows everybody to basically be a part of the sport, which I really enjoy. And then, in the game itself, there's so much to gain from it depending on how you approach the game. Like, you can be a great athlete and you just rely on, okay, I'm just going to be faster than you. I'm just going to make my moves that way. You could be a student of the game, and you learn these tactics and you use that to your advantage, which that was the type of player I was. Never been a great athlete, but I just like knowing what I need to do. And if I know what I'm doing and I know what you're doing, then I'm going to be in a position to still make a play. And that's what football is kind of about, of bringing all these different elements together. I know a lot of people not familiar with the sport just basically call it rugby with protection. But it's vastly different sports. It's like saying soccer and tennis are the same thing. That it's not. They might have similar roots because football is an evolution of what rugby was, but because of how it kept changing, how rules kept added, tactics kept being added, it just transformed into something completely different. And yeah, now you have a sport that's more explosive. It's short bursts of going 100%, which is the mentality you want to teach people. Compared to, for example, in rugby, you have this continuous movement. It's more like soccer in that way, like you're constantly going. But you also have, like, if the ball's on the left, the guy on the right isn't doing that much. Whereas with football, they're all played into each other. So the ball could be going one way, but all the 11 guys have to be on the exact same page to make something work constantly. So it's high explosion, it's high impact, while at the same time being mentally very tough and stimulating as well.
And how do you handle having all 11 players on the same page? Because I know from when I played that sometimes it's a difficulty because you get into the huddle and you call out a play.
Yeah.
And then there's always one or two guys who are, what was that one again? So how do you tackle that from a leadership point of view as well?
Yeah, that's always the biggest obstacle in my opinion, because like getting people to run or something isn't very hard, but having everybody to run exact things is of course more taxing. You rely a lot on the people around you. When I started, like I said, like I took it over by myself. I was the only guy there, so I was in charge of everybody on the field, and that came with its challenges. Because then it doesn't matter if I know what you need to do. I can't tell 30-something people at the same time what they should be doing. Currently, I'm in a very good position. We have a good coaching staff. We have some veterans mixed with new guys, so they help each other out and give these pointers. You get what is called a playbook. That's just on paper or on your computer, just the explanation of the plays, where you need to be, why you need to be there, at what time you need to be somewhere. And then you practice that, you work together. That's a very important part, because seeing it is one thing, but then being on the field and actually executing it together is another. But yeah, it's just repetition, making sure you get guys who are motivated to learn, ask questions. You help them out as much as you can, and then hopefully with a combination of good coaching and good leadership, you get everybody on that same page to achieve some success that they might not be able to ever do individually in their life.
I think also that a lot of people who haven't played the game, they don't understand how it's almost like synchronized swimming kind of thing. Yeah. Everything has to be exact. If you take one step too much in one direction, you could mess up the block that you have to do over there, or the guy that has the ball, he doesn't get around you. Yeah. So it's really this difficulty in getting everything on step basis when everyone is running around. Pretty much, yeah. No, that's very important to, like I said, just practice it, get to know each other. Like I touched on, I played a lot of sports, a lot of team sports, but to me, football is the ultimate team sport, because take, for example, basketball. If you have a guy who's just an amazing athlete, or he's just, ahead above everybody else, it's a lot easier to make that guy the focal point. Whereas in football, let's say you have a receiver, a guy who has to run and catch, what you used to do. He could be the best guy in the world, but if your quarterback can't make the throws, he disappears from the game. If your big guys, your lineman can't protect the quarterback and he keeps being tackled, it's kind of hard to throw the ball when you're on the ground. So that guy doesn't matter now. That receiver that was so great can't really be a part of the team anymore, because you just can't effectively make him a part of the game plan. So that's why I said, like, it's really this team sport where you all have to be working together. You have to be on the same page. We have a saying, we're only as strong as our weakest link. So it doesn't matter who our star player is. It matters more who's our bottom player. Who's the guy we have to make sure, like, you have to step it up so everybody else can do their job as well.
And then now going back on a more practical note, you said that in 2011 you guys won, and then you left on this big high, but people were leaving the team. Yeah. And then you were basically put in the position to kind of build up the Maastricht Wildcats. What were the first moves that you made to do that?
I think the very first thing I did is probably the best thing I've ever done for the Wildcats, which was smart enough to realize I can't do this all by myself. On a football field, I know exactly what I need to do, how to do it. The behind-the-scenes stuff, making the board, not my strong suit. Luckily, at this point, my girlfriend was already very committed to football, because it was just a way to connect. She watched all the games with me, and she is more the person who's good at doing these things. So the first move I ever did was just to ask her if she wanted to do this with me. She then became the president of the club, so technically she owns it. And really work together and put a lot of time and energy into building foundations. I think the first moves I started to make on the field weren't the right ones because I was trying to simulate what it was before. But we had, a coaching staff at the championship level. I think we had 5 coaches, all Americans, all played football their whole life. Like, it's a lot easier for them to get that across. You had like 60 people on the roster. Everything you wanted to do, you were able to do. Now I had to figure out, okay, how do I get 4 people into becoming 20 people that also know what they're doing, while at the same time making sure the finances are in order, the paperwork is in order, all the stuff that comes with it, and you can't do that yourself. And that was the biggest hurdle early on that I really had to overcome to make sure we kept going forward. And making her the team president and being more involved, that was definitely the best first move I could have made.
And I want to talk more about then you kind of finding your own voice in that, because if you had these other coaches that always had this huge amount of resources, then how did you start to find your voice as a coach, as a leader in that scenario?
That was a very interesting transformation because the way I coach is very different than how I used to like being coached. I personally am a guy, I expect me to know it. So if I make a mistake, if I mess up, I want a guy just in my ear screaming, hollering at me, like, figure you're out. So that's the way I liked it. That's the way I also am personally more off the field. So that's how I try to do that in the first go. But, that falls kind of on deaf ears if you just have a group of guys who've never done it before, don't know what the hell they should be doing. And then, you have me cussing you out. Then it's like, I don't know if this sport is for me. So after that first year of having a full team together again and playing full tackle football, not going great. I think we lost on average by like 50-0. So that wasn't the best season I've been a part of. But what I noticed throughout those losses is we did some together. The team. And then I started to take a look back after the year, like, why did I want football to continue in Maastricht? Why didn't I go like some of my guys at the time? They went to play in Germany, for example. I got some offers to go to Germany, play paid football. And now I'm paying to play football. So it was a different level. And I was like, but why did I decide that? Was it really just because I'm so lazy in traveling and I didn't want to do that? But then I thought about, no, it was more football came to me in my life when not everything was going great. And I think quite literally helped me go through that period. So kind of football saved my life. And that was what Maastricht meant to me. So I wanted to become more of that. So my coaching style changed more from making sure you got everything you needed to do to making sure you are in a position that you can actually do these things and want to do these things. And then I changed just into a more personal approach, which if you ask head coaches throughout football, they will all tell you, don't do that. That takes so much out of you because let's say you have a roster of 50 guys. If I know from every single person what's going on with their life, it becomes a bit hard. Like if we have a practice where we want to be mean and it's a lot of condition stuff, but I have a guy next to me like, oh, his mother passed away this week. Like I can't really be yelling at him if he's not fully into it. If I don't know, then it's easier to coach. But I wanted that personal touch. I wanted him to feel like he could still be a part of the team and we would help him through that period instead of yelling at him that he wasn't, feeling too great. And I think that really transformed how I started to coach. And I think on the level of the team we have, that is still a thing that we make a priority. I think that attracts a lot of people as well. We have guys who come from different teams and like after their first or second practice, they sort of, oh, I like it here a lot more. I want to just be here because it just makes them feel good. And, at the end of the day, playing football for our team, it's a hobby. So you should view this as a hobby. You're not going to do a hobby if you don't like it. You're not going to go making sure you're in shape, playing a violent sport if you're not fully behind it. So I think that was the biggest coaching change, and I'm glad I did it. I still miss sometimes being more of the asshole that I prefer myself, but I think in the grand scheme of things, I think that was definitely the best move to go with.
Okay. So then now zooming kind of back in on a more practical level, American football is really niche in the Netherlands. Oh. And I'm wondering when you were starting out, then how did you actually go about recruiting those first players and get them on the team and get them excited?
That also changed throughout the years a bit. like I said, I started when I was like 15, 16, and that basically just became because a friend of mine asked, and he was there because a friend of his asked, and a friend of his. So it was like a chain reaction. So the teams I used to play with were always small. Like when we played, at some point we played 9-on-9 football, which is, of course, less than the normal 11-on-11. But then we went to games with 12 people. So you were also playing everything, and we loved that because that's what we were used to. But then, when we started getting to national level, and we were playing for the championship, now you're playing 11-11 with 60 people on the roster who would come in there for different reasons. We still had the group that was there when I started that sort of just grew up playing it here, so they were still here. Now you had guys who played for different teams, but they knew like, okay, Maastricht is in an upward direction. That's a good shot at winning a championship. Let's go over there. We had prestige in our coaching. They were known throughout Europe. So us being in Maastricht, being close to the Belgian border and the German border, some of those players started coming over here. So boom, your roster fills itself. There wasn't a lot of recruitment needed because people knew that's where we're going. When I started to take over, I realized that's not always the case, right? Now, if I'm a guy, let's say I play in Belgium, do I want to go to a team for a coach? I don't know. Show up and see, there's only like 7 people here. Why would I do this? So early on, we did a lot of clinics at schools and started focusing more on trying to get youth players first, because they have a bit more time than if you already have a job or you're here for as a student or something. So we built with that. Then we started getting competitive again. Now we needed more people to come in. Then you have students that come in. Us being here, you have a lot of German students, and in Germany football is a bit bigger. So you had some guys who'd played before, and you sort of kind of had to get lucky because Chantal, my girlfriend, was taking. Basically, it was a full-time job to do all the stuff behind the scenes. For me, it was basically a full-time job to make sure I coach everything on the field. Because in comparison, if you look at an NFL team, the highest level of football, they have 15, 16 coaches on their staff. I'm doing all that work by myself. So I didn't really have extra time to continue to put into recruiting. So it was kind of hard to figure out, like, where's the balance here? We got lucky because we did a combined practice with a new German team in Aachen, which isn't too far. And by now I developed my coaching staff of trying to be relatable, talk to the guys, make them feel like, hey, I want you to be here. Even if you're not a great football player, I still think you're a great person, so you can be beneficial for the team and the team can be beneficial for you. So after doing these joint practices, what I heard through the grapevine is that the coach from their team was basically trying to do that to get our players to join his team. But the opposite happened. All their players liked me more, liked what we were doing here more, and they all just left and came to us. Yeah. So now I got 8-9 players out of Aachen all of a sudden, and boom, you had a team again. But that up and down wave is hard to sustain, and I gotta basically hope there are some people that join the team that either played before or have athletic abilities that you can turn into something. Now with the last few years, we are getting a bit more stable. So now and like I said, I'm blessed now to have a more substantial coaching staff. Now there is a bit more time to do some recruitment, but that's still a hard thing because, again, if I try to, if I see a guy on the street and go like, oh, he looks like, big guy, let's see if we can get him to play football, they don't know what it is, or they think, well, it'll probably not be much. Sometimes you get like Americans from the army bases. In their head, football means you got to be practicing 5 times a week. You got to do all this extra stuff because that's how they used to play football. That's very, very different if you're here. If you show up twice a week, you're already going to be better than most of the people that play in the Netherlands. Most players, because of work, family, whatever, maybe practice once a week. So you're trying to convince these Americans to basically do it like that. So you basically have to make it like a personal plan to try and get players because everybody looks at sport very different. With the biggest group being, I don't know what it is. So how am I going to convince a guy for in the Netherlands, like almost everybody grows up playing soccer, how am I going to convince him to leave his soccer team with his buddies that he's been playing with for 10 years to come play a sport that, in my opinion, does a lot more for you just throughout life, the lessons you can learn. Because the funny thing is the guys that do want to make that leap and try out like, oh, I'll just try something different, almost unanimously always agree like, oh, this is better for me. There's a lot more here than just, I'm going to play some sport with a friend. Like, it means more. But getting them to make the first step, that is still, the hard part. We're still trying to figure out different plans of attack, trying to recruit. But yeah, that is a big hurdle.
So I remember also being with a team, it's really like a brotherhood kind of thing. Like, you get this feeling of you belong to the group. And even one of the first practices I came in, people were like, oh, come on, let's go over here. We'll teach you everything. And I didn't know anything about anything.
Yeah.
How do you get those core values into the players when they first come in, or when you build up everything?
Yeah, I think outside of making Chantal the club president, I think that was the second best move we did, is really focus on, I want that culture to be there. Because every year I reevaluate how the year went beforehand, and making sure, we're improving. And like I said, we had a year where we lost everything, like 50-0. And we had a year where we went to the national championship and won it. But if I look back on both those seasons, I enjoyed the 50-0 season a lot more. And that was because the people there were doing it to play together. The people who were there in the championship were there because they wanted to win a championship, which is fine, right? You'll always have different athletes, different reasons of why you want to be an athlete. But I noticed, like, we won that championship, and all the guys who just wanted a championship now had no more reason to be here. They all go away. You have to start again. And that happened before in 2007 as well, when we won another national championship. That sort of kept happening. And me being by myself and with Chantal behind the scenes, it was sort of like, we can't sustain that. We can't keep going up, down, up, down. So how do we create a base where people feel like this community, really feel this brothership that everybody talks about? Because if you watch any football clip online, every team, doesn't matter if it's Pee-wee football to NFL, they all talk about brotherhood and family. But then you see it in practice, and it's sort of like, well, you say that, but is your team really, like, making that your core value? So we really hammered on the point, like, that has to be our core value. I started a saying, probably heard it somewhere, but I don't know who said it first. But I like the saying, individually you fall, together we rise. That was something we really hammered on to let people know, like, hey, if you get your ass beat, we'll all be there to help you back up. And making sure that is how I coached as well. So it came from, like, the highest guy. Then I made sure my captains did that, my coaches did that. And then you indeed start creating this culture where it's like, I don't care if you don't even know how to put on a helmet. I'll help you out, right? And you see guys who, maybe it happened this August again. Like, there was a guy, it was his second practice, and he was immediately helping someone else who was his first practice. And that means he already saw that from the first practice. Oh, this is how I'm supposed to behave, because the club is behaving that way. And at some point, once you have that culture growing, it becomes a lot easier, because now I don't have to be pushing these values. Now it's already in the structure of how everything is built. So I think that is something you have to put in time to really make that a thing and make that a focus, even though, you might lose a game 50-0. How am I going to convince these guys, like, but this is a good thing. This is something we can still build on, right? You can still come to practice and not feel like a loser, because if we lose the next game 40-0, that's progress, right? And slowly but surely, you will come forward, as long as you make sure you stay true to your values. Because that is a alluring thing to change, right? You can put your finances into different points as well. Like, our finances was also built in this idea of making a family, but you could also go, all right, let's just hire, an ex-NFL player or something like that and throw all your money at that. You'll be successful, but for a year, right? And that's not what we wanted. We wanted to have this thing that no matter who showed up, or if you, for example, if your wrist would allow it and you could play football again, it will immediately feel like it did before, because it's still the same thing. And we put a lot of pride in that. We put a lot of time and effort in that, and resources to make sure that is the focus, and really make it a family, really make it a brotherhood. I still talk to people that haven't played for me in 10, 15 years. It was my birthday last Monday. I got text from people. Honestly, I don't remember them, because they maybe had done 4 practices, but apparently it left an impact to them, and that's a testimony to the whole team that we could do that for someone. So yeah, that's definitely something we put a lot of pride in.
And what are, like, the main challenges you faced early on? Now you've built it in a way where it's more self-sustaining, but getting that momentum built up and institutionalizing those values is very difficult.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you did to facilitate that process?
Yeah, like I said, the main thing is being consistent in it and trying to have a positive message, which for me personally is always hard to do because I'm not the guy. I'm not an optimist. So, you have to somehow be real, but still give them like hope, give them something to hang on to. So, I think the challenges early on was just seeing these guys who, you make a bad play, you hang your head, and just these little moments to then go like, hey, it's all right, man. We have a saying called short memory. Like, just forget you messed up. We'll make the next play. And if you make the next play, we'll make that a big deal, right? Now it's like that memory of you messing up just becomes background noise when the memory of you making something great is pushed to the forefront. And that's something that I think is very important that a lot of people miss, is that they look at where they want to be, but they don't look at these little steps. Because the little thing of, you catch maybe 100 balls in a practice and you drop one, and if you don't let that player know, like, hey, that's okay, then that player is going to go home and remember the one drop, not the 99 catches. And I think that early on is very challenging because I was by myself. So I tried to pick out players that I think, okay, they can fill some sort of leadership role. In football, you have your captains, that I could make them like give them a voice. That's very important. Don't just say like, oh, he's the captain. No, also, sometimes I see something happen, I would nudge the captain. It's like, hey, you go talk to him. Because now that player starts seeing like, oh, he's more than just a guy with a title, because a title doesn't mean anything. So you have to find these people that instill the same core values as you have and are willing to also go for that, because now you have to pick a captain who also does all the little things correct, right? If after the practice is over, is he a guy who just stands there and watches while everybody cleans up the field, or is he the first guy who starts cleaning up the field? These little things that might go unnoticed, like step for step, but once you look back in the big picture, you see like, oh, that's actually how we built that up. You have to build this structure with people. It can't just be my vision and just go, oh, this is my vision, make it work. Like, it's not going to work. So I think one of the biggest skills you can have as a leader, be it a coach or a boss or whatever you are, is to be okay with finding other people and give them power. I see that in football a lot, where head coaches tend to be very stubborn. It could be a guy, for example, the guy from the Aachen team that joined. He had this saying like, "Well, I've been doing this for 25 years. I know it works." It didn't work because he came from Germany. That's a different level of football. Those are guys who might already know football. Now you have to go like, this guy's never seen a football before. He doesn't even know what it looks like. How do I teach him how to do that? So it's me then trying to get some control there and like let me run a bit more to practice. And he didn't want to do that because he was going, no, I'm seniority, right? I've been coaching longer. And nothing wrong with him as a person. I love the guy off the field. I loved talking football with him. I just disagreed with his philosophy of coaching. So when I started to have more and more power, instead of me trying to harness that, it was like, okay, how can I get someone else some power? So not only does it make my job easier because now I have people to lean on, it also just empowers those guys to continue to improve, because he might reach his peak as a football player, but there's still growth as a leader. And you want anybody in everything to improve, right? And I think that letting go of that ego is very important, and that it's very hard for people in a leadership position, because usually you get there because you had the ego to want to be there. You wanted to be the boss. You wanted to be in charge. And now you are there. Now you have to go, well, here, you take a little bit of this as well. So yeah, I think that's a good quality to have. And I'm not sitting here saying like, oh yeah, I did that perfectly. No, that was a journey I had to figure out. That 50-0 season happened partially because of that, right? I was sort of like, no, we'll do it this way because that's how I want it done. That's how I've done it. That's how we did it when we won a chip. And then I realized, well, but it didn't work. So does that mean this whole theory doesn't work? Or is it just because I have to look at the situation I'm in, look at the people I'm working with, right? You have this thing in football where some coaches look at people like X's and O's. What I mean by that is if you have a playbook, for example, you use an X to mark a defensive player and an O to mark an offensive player, and that's how you draw your plays. If I just look at that and let's say my O runs a certain route and he has to do a certain thing, if he's not able to do that, then I can't stubbornly go like, well, but it says you can do that. I've seen people do it, so you can do it. No, maybe he can't, but maybe he can do something else. So let's change what he's supposed to do instead of trying to change him, because everybody has limitations. So it's really about figuring out, how do I make these things work with the personnel I have, with the resources I have, with the time I have. Because, like I said, we have these different people. You could have students, you could have people who have their job, you have people who have a family. They're not going to be at every practice. They're not going to put in all the time to learn all these stuff. So you have to really continue to adjust to what you're actually working with, while simultaneously pushing towards where you want to be. But that's a challenge. It's hard work, but I think in the end, if at least you're semi-improving, I think there's also satisfaction in actually making that work.
Okay, I think I got a good follow-up question.
Go ahead.
So, wait, let me start over. You were speaking earlier about picking captains as well, and that raised the question in my head when I was thinking, if you're picking captains based on core values, where does technical ability come in, right? So how do you balance those two when you pick the leaders on the team? Because I bet some captains, or some coaches, they prefer to pick just star players that are just, their athletic ability is off the charts, but their core values are crap. So how do you deal with that tension?
That's a very good question, because that is a very hard thing to do. Because some people will become a leader even though they didn't choose to or want to, but just because of their athletic ability. If I join a team and I see a guy who just makes every play, in my head it's like, oh, I want to be like that guy. But if that guy's kind of a dick, then, I don't want him to learn that. So what I do with those guys, I just start having conversations with them off the field. I just talk to them like, hey, you got to understand, like, I love you as a football player, but you're going to be an example, because people are just going to look at you. It is not my choice to make you that way. It's not your choice to make you that way, but it just happens. So we got to make sure that whatever you do as a football player doesn't get diminished because becoming a cancer to the team by having these bad habits is going to be worse than your individual performance. Because again, he could be the best player on the field, but if the 10 people around him are not good, we're not going to do anything. So it's really about then talking to this guy to try and find a midpoint where we can work together. How can I bring him down a little bit more while not taking away what makes him special? Because maybe he's that good because he just doesn't give a fuck, right? And if he's just flying around hitting everything because he's just full go, doesn't care about anything, I don't want to take that away from him. I don't want to make him a worse player, but I also don't want to make him a worse teammate. And I think, again, working with people individually there is very important, because some guys are just by nature a bit more hard-headed, a bit more stubborn. I'm pretty sure you're thinking of a guy right now who is still a part of the team, but he's a big part of the team, because the guy he's probably thinking of is a guy I've had a lot of conversations with, because now, back in the day, I picked the captains. Now we make the team pick captains. He almost every single time gets picked as a captain, and he deserves to. But it also means he has a more important voice. So I got to make sure that voice isn't saying the wrong things. So there have been scuffles, there have been issues, but that's a part of football as well. What I've come to really like from that is he is also the one who will do the dirty work, right? He is the guy that if I have people who are just playing too soft and they're not really going, right, now it's going to hurt everybody else, because if I keep going against a guy who's not trying, I'm not getting better either. So I need someone to cuss him out. But it can't be me, because I want that player to still feel safe and be able to talk to me and make sure we have this connection. So I need someone who doesn't mind being the asshole to be an asshole. So we've worked in this connection where he knows, like, half of the team is going to hate me. It's just going to be that way. But if he's okay with that, that value is super important. So again, it's like working to his strengths and try to negate his weaknesses by making sure I keep him in his value. I keep him as the captain. I keep him as the guy, like, hey, that's what you see you could become as a football player, but that's also some of the things you have to be willing to sacrifice, right? I can't be everybody's friend constantly. But again, it's that balance thing, and you need a guy right next to him who's going to be the guy who immediately after he's done yelling to you comes up, grabs you by the shoulder, and is like, hey, man, it's okay, man. You'll get better. Because it's another one of the sayings we really love to say is nobody would yell at you if we don't expect you to be better. right? I'm not going to waste my energy. I'm not yelling at you if that's the best you can do. Like, what is that going to improve? But if I see you're not doing your best because you don't care enough, or you're not willing to, if we do some sprints, you're not willing to sprint every time. You're sort of jogging because I got 4 more. I'll just jog these. Then you need someone who's just going to yell at you because now you're not being your best self. And I think that, again, is that balance and really making sure people can thrive in the role that is meant for them.
So you're not just the coach for the Wildcats, you're also the defensive backs coach?
Yeah.
For the Dutch Lions, the Dutch national team.
Yes.
What are the big differences between coaching a regional club to the national team?
Oh, it's massive. It's massive. I think, like the regional club, like I said, it's a hobby. Those people have to want to be there, so I have to make it a place they want to be. The nationals is, if you don't like it here, screw off. We got somebody else. So the way I coach there is very different. It's also the people you have there, of course, they already know what they're doing. Otherwise, you don't get selected to become a national team. So now I can coach really in depth, which that's the reason I said yes, because I've been asked before, and I've always, again, the traveling is not what I like, so I've always sort of went like, nah. But this year was sort of, I have a stable club now. I have a good coaching staff. I'm not needed to do 40 hours a week into the club, so if I have some more time now. Let's try and do this. And then I get there, and it's like, oh, I can coach, and I can be the person I actually am there. Like, I can be a bit more of a dick. I can be more aggressive. I can sort of expect more, because they need to know it, right? Because now you're not just representing your hobby you want to do. You're representing a whole country, right? If we have a game in Ireland on the 19th of October. That's the first official game that the national team has played in about a decade. So everybody expects us to do bad. So I don't want to go there and actually do bad, because we have a bunch of talent on the team. But now you got to have to make sure these guys are also on the same page, because every single one of them is the superstar of their own team. But now they get there, it's like, now you're just a body, right? You might be the best player you've ever seen, but now you're right next to a guy who's better than you. How do you handle that? So it's different challenges, different approaches. The coaching aspect is, it's the big change of being, I can expect you to be this way. I can be very hard on you because you are supposed to know it, and otherwise get out of here, compared to I have to sort of bring you along, help you with it. And both is fun to do in their own right. And then the off-the-field connection with the players is vastly different, because, like, the guys from my team, I consider almost all of them like friends as well. Like, we hang out outside of the practices. I know about their personal lives because that's what we talk about. The guys on the national team, half the guys, I don't even know their name. I just know what number they wear. So that relationship is different. Comes with their own challenges, but that's also what keeps it interesting for me, because, like I said, I started when I was 15, 16. I turned 36 on Monday, so it's been a while. So at some point, like, I like doing some new things now. I like learning. I really enjoy learning, and for the last couple of years, I was the guy. There was nobody to learn from. I was the highest we had. And now working again with international coaches, to an American head coach who's really successful wherever he goes. Like, I'm a little fly on the wall whenever he talks. He's like, I'm listening better to him than his own players are, because I want to learn what makes him so successful. Is there something I can take from him that I can implement in my own team to make that more successful? Because at the end of the day, I would love to win nationally. I would love to be a part of the resurgence of American football for the country. But that compares nowhere near if I can make my own club the best in the country, because that's more personal. That's me. That's us. That is the family we've built up. So, yeah.
So now that you also coach on a higher level than in the club scenes, the pressure also rises a bit, because, I mean, a lot of people have probably seen these videos in the changing room where the head coach is not shouting at the players, but he's actually shouting at the coach that's coaching those players.
Yep.
So how do you manage these pressures? Because it really trickles down. If the defensive backs do bad on the field, you might be the one that hears the first thing from the head coach. So how do you handle these pressures?
It's definitely different. I tend to like it more. I tend to thrive when everything is worked against me. So I take it very serious. I want to make sure I know everything I need to know. if someone messes up and before the coach even has a chance to turn around, like I want to already be talking to the guy to let him know, like, hey man, we got to get better here. And I always make sure we say we, because if you mess up, that's also my fault. Because did you just mess up because you're not good, or did you mess up because you don't know your stuff? And are you not trying, or am I not doing good enough to actually teach you, right? And I know on national level, it isn't because you're not good. It is because you don't know your stuff. So it's definitely challenging. It's definitely in some way weird again to not be, the final say and be in charge. But I'm really enjoying it because it keeps me on my toes. It makes me have to do different things because, of course, it's a different playbook. It's a different philosophy. It's a very different design than it is for the Wildcats. So at the point I am now, I'm really enjoying that because I can be a student again. And I really like learning more and more about something that you think you already know about. But then, another door opens up. You realize, ooh, I didn't know that yet. And another, ooh, I didn't know yet that either. So, yeah, it's very challenging, but it's very rewarding as well if it works out. But we'll see how that goes throughout these next coming games.
Fair. All right. So you mentioned earlier, let me go again. You mentioned earlier that you kind of have these two sides. You have the club back here in Maastricht and also the national team and wanting to grow American football on that level. American football is still really niche in the Netherlands. So how are you maybe trying to contribute to its growing popularity?
Yeah, it is a niche sport. We do hope, of course, now playing nationals again, that will help, get some recognition. I think it's very important for clubs to try and become part of their own communities. You hope your city is a bit behind you. We see growth there a lot if the city is very supportive. Groningen, for example, is making massive strides. And every time I talk to the people in charge there, it's like, well, yeah, the city gave us this, the city gave us that. And, they gave us a place to host the Super Bowl, which, airs in the middle of the night. And nobody has a license for that, but the city made an exception for that. And they have like thousands of people who come there. That's a vast and quick way to grow that. So, you see this throughout the cities that give a lot of support really helps. So we try to get a good relationship with the city going, which isn't always the easiest. But, you hope if you grow your own success, if you grow national success, that the city sees more value in that and you start supporting that a bit. Us just trying to talk to community, get people involved. If we see, for example, the same fan every game and he or she has no connection to anybody on the team, they just like the sport. You try to pick those out and it's like, hey, let's just ask them, do they want to help out? It could be as simple as being in the cafeteria to help run the bar when we have a game. Oh, apologies.
Oh, good.
When we have a game or something. But lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, if you see a fan consistently, then you can ask them to help out. And that engagement is important. We try to do on social media more, and just really hope, overall, if everybody's working together in a positive direction, that it starts growing naturally from that. But yeah, you're always going to be competing with soccer a lot in the Netherlands. Tennis, hockey, all these things are a lot bigger than football is. So also the clubs trying to work together is important. I have a pretty decent connection with a guy who's in charge for Eindhoven, for example, who play a division below us. But you still want to make sure that stays like a positive connection and something you can hope to build on and do some practices together or something like that. So yeah, you have to simultaneously build your own club, which we already talked about is sometimes hard to find players for, while also trying to make sure like nationally get a bit more known, so there's more support there. I know the new board from the AFBN, the board of the Netherlands football, they're trying to make different moves than were done before, just to see like what's working. But yeah, it's challenging, but we're trying to make sure everybody there again gets on the same page, works together. Even though come Sunday you play a game, they're your enemies, but as soon as that game is over, now it's like, hey, how can we make sure we can both continue to thrive so football also becomes better, which at the end of the day is why we do it.
Very cool. So this is the first season back on a national level in more than a decade.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, I think it's been around a decade, yeah.
Whoa. That must be cool to be a part of.
Yeah. I think they also approach it a pretty decent way. Like, one of the main reasons I say yes this time was at the time they started this, my girlfriend was also part of the AFBN board. So she had those connections with the head coach who wanted to start the team. One of the worries we had was financially, because the last time we did it, basically every club paid for it, and that was not good for the growth. But now it was any money he puts in or the team needs is on him. Any money the team makes, like sponsorship or everything, that gets siphoned back to him. So if we're successful, it's good. If we're unsuccessful, it doesn't hurt the country. It just hurts his wallet. So I think that was a very important thing, and that was something.
Who is this?
Fred Armstrong is his name, and that was very important. And Chantal sort of pushed that a bit as well, and I think that was a very smart thing to do. And then his goal was he was going to bring his own staff of people he's worked with internationally, but then also pick coaches from the Dutch teams to try and elevate them as well. And Chantal kept saying, like, yeah, you should have a conversation with him. But again, like, I hate traveling, so I kept saying, no, I don't want to do that. I said, just have one conversation. I said, okay. So I have one conversation with the guy. And I tend to get along well with Americans because, at least football Americans, they're football to them is life. So it's a lot easier for me to connect there. And one of the first things he said, like, I don't want to come there just to coach players. I also want to coach the coaches. And that sentence alone was sort of like, maybe I should do this. Because again, like, for a couple of years, I was the only one. There was nobody I was learning from.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so you're just kind of constantly, and also the second guessing, like, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong?
At some point, you're just doing the same steps, but if you're successful, you're like, oh, it's working. But if you're unsuccessful, you're like, oh, it's not working. But what's the difference?
And there could be 1,000 reasons.
Exactly. So that was one of the reasons that I sort of went like, yeah, let's give it a shot. And since then, like, working with him, working with the defensive coordinator of the team, like, I really like. The defensive coordinator is basically me, but older. Like, he jokes around while also being very serious about football, which I think is a very important thing to do to keep it fun.
So we talked about now how you want to grow American football in the Netherlands. But what advice would you give to young athletes and coaches to kind of get involved with American football in the Netherlands? What is the first steps that they could take to get involved with it?
I mean, like, the first thing is just try it. That's really it, because football is a sport that the reason people who get involved with football tend to make it like a big part of their life is just football gives you so much. It's really something we say, like, the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. But if you never give it a shot, you're not going to figure it out. And usually one practice is almost enough. Like, you try once, if you get hit and you got up and you're like, I never want to feel that again, football's not for you. If you get hit and you get up like, that was kind of exhilarating, you're going to be a football player. I think for coaches, it's really understand that you don't have to know everything to coach, especially not in the Netherlands yet. You just want to be a guy. You need passion. You have to want to do it. You have to have the patience to teach guys a complicated sport, and like, build personal connections. So I don't really have like advice of what you should do other than just come out. Of course, it helps being an athlete, going to the gym, all this sort of extra stuff, but it's not necessary. I haven't gone to the gym in 15 years, but I can still play because there's different, like I said before, there's different ways to approach it. I approach football with my mind, not really with my body. As long as my body can still get from A to B, I'll be fine. If you're a guy like, no, I got to be the strongest guy in the world to play football, it's like, all right, if that's what you think it takes, well, then also go to the gym and feel like you're ready physically. But honestly, everybody's ready physically. Because if your team, at least if you go to a team, that is smart in the way they approach it, they're not going to put a guy who, will get tired from a warm-up. They're not immediately going to put him in a full tackle drill with dudes who've been hitting people for 10 years. That's not what you do, right? If you get tired from the warm-up, cool. Now we know the next step for us as coaching staff, as team, is to get you to the point where you're no longer tired from doing a warm-up. And that can only happen if you just try it. And really don't have expectations of what you should be. A thing a lot of people say is like, oh, I'm too small to play football. I'm too skinny. I'm too slow. No, you're not. You're really not. Anybody can do it. I've seen players who, the first practice they showed up, I was sort of like, I don't know if football's going to be the thing, but let's try. And within a year, they become a starter and they have impact on the game. And vice versa. I've seen guys who show up and, as a coach, you get giddy. It's like, ooh, look at him. He's like 6'4", runs fast, pure muscle, and then can't understand football. Doesn't know how to learn it, doesn't care, doesn't put in the time, because in his head, I'm a great athlete, that's good enough. No, it isn't. So, yeah, I think that the only thing you can do is just give it a try. Google whatever your closest team is, go there, talk. That's very important. Communication is always key. Talk to whatever coaches are there and figure out, like, is there a way we can make this work, right? Also, like, dedication-wise, like I said, some people, they have their families or something. I have students who, for example, almost every weekend fly back home. They're not going to be at the Fridays practice, but they'll be there every Tuesday. And, that's enough. Some guys think, if I have to sign up, I have to do everything constantly. It's not what it is. It is a hobby in the Netherlands, right? If you want to become, a superstar, because we've sent guys to the States before. We've sent guys to play professionally in Germany before. But those are guys who had that as a dream. So we'll help you there as well. So you really want to approach it to whatever you want to get out of football. Because if you put in 50%, football gives you 50% back. If you put in 100%, football gives you 100% back. If you just want to do 1%, you want to run around, catch a ball, look pretty, sure. But then understand that that's all you're going to be. But if that's enough for you, then that's good, right? You can still be a part of a team. You can still feel that community. But it really starts with just go out once. Yeah.
Cool. So looking back now, what have been some of your proudest moments building up the Maastricht Wildcats?
Another good question. There have been a lot of things that I think, looking back, I can be proud of, which in itself is a statement. I tend to not be satisfied very quickly. I always want a bit more. The best. I mean, being part of championships is always fun, but I think the best is just the connections I've built with people. Having multiple guys throughout the years tell me that football saved their life, or football is the reason they became successful in business, because they just apply the same rules, the same discipline. I think that's very important. I think that's my biggest success, is to have other people learn something that isn't just for the few years they play football, but is for the rest of their life.
Yeah. And then what about the future goals that you have for both the Wildcats and the Dutch national team? What are things that you work towards that give you energy?
Well, for the Wildcats, of course, it's continuing to grow, continue to get even more stable. So, it becomes an institution again, and that people know in Maastricht that the first team you think of is us, because I'm pretty sure we're the only team that plays nationally and in the highest level. I mean, even our soccer team isn't very good. So, there should be some pride in that. People who are from Maastricht, they should know, like, that is your team. We are representing you. We have to go play Amsterdam, Utrecht, and everything. Like, I think that's something we want to continue to build to. So that's definitely where I see the future heading. Of course, on the field success is very important as well, but I think off the field, the behind the scenes stuff, I think is more important. So I think that's really where I hope in the future everything is sorted out, financially, and everything is the way it should be. So we give the best products for the people who want to be a part of the team, and that they can grow from there. And nationally, it's just about winning nationally. You want to make a name. You want to make all these countries that sort of look at us like, oh, you didn't have a team for 10 years. Like, you're not going to be successful. And, like, if we can go that first year and just win everything and immediately just smash them in the mouth, it's like, what can you say now? We haven't been here for 10 years, but it looked like you guys haven't been putting in work in those 10 years. We have. So, that's what I would like nationally.
And then I think one of the main things that I'm pulling a lot from this conversation, which is also why I like to watch documentaries on coaches and sports and things like this, is that there's so many parallels between sports, life, and business. And so what are, like, maybe the biggest lessons that you've learned from American football that you translate to life?
I like these questions, man. I think the best lesson to learn in anything is that failure is just a step to success. So it starts with the small things. The first time you get hit, you're like, I don't mind, but I'd rather not get hit. But I need to get better to not get hit. I need to get fast. I need to develop a moveset or something. And I think that's wherever you go. Like, if I get a job, I'm not going to be the best employee in the first day. The only thing I can be the best at is my effort. And it's the same as we say on the field. Like, I can teach you football. I can teach a rock how to play football. But you have to put in the effort. I can't make you run 100%. You got to want to run 100%. And if you do that, if you develop that attitude of like, I'm just going to do everything with full effort, full dedication, you're going to be successful. In life, in football, in business, wherever you go, you will be successful. But you can't expect it just to happen because someone else said, oh, this is what you should do. No, you got to find your own path. You got to take these lessons. You got to learn from it. In football, all of that is there because you got to learn how to work together with someone. You got to learn that sometimes someone else is more valuable in that moment. How can I still support that? And you got to be okay with, hey, sometimes I am the guy everybody looks at. You know, if you're one-on-one with a guy, you have to make that tackle. You can't now look at the guy next to you. It's like, hey, can you come in? No, all the pressure is on you now. So you learn how to be a part of a team while at the same time be to the point where you can be your own guy. So I think there's so many lessons in football that translate so well just because it has so much. There's so many different aspects to it. You know, like we talked about a bit before, like you could be the best athlete. So let's say we translate this to work. You could be a guy who's always there. You're never sick and whatever. You know, you're there on time. You're the first guy that arrives. You're the last guy to leave. But you don't know how to learn a playbook, which translates to like you don't know how to actually do your job. You're there, but you're making mistakes. You know, now your job that should take 4 hours is taking 8 hours because you do everything twice because you can't do it right the first time. You know, that's all things that you can learn and that you can improve on. Right? Everything is teachable. Everything is coachable. Not just the physical side, also the mental side, the attitude. All of that translates very well. And I'm always proud to see that. You know, if I see someone's Instagram of, hey, I graduated this and this, or I got promoted, like I'm happy because I know like they worked to get there. And that the way you get there, you know, you have to develop that path you're taking. And I think football really helps in doing that because you're just basically confronted with a bunch of different obstacles. How are you going to challenge them? What do you learn from this? How do you improve? So yeah, I like that translation a lot. Yeah.
So Bart, we have this closing tradition on the podcast where we ask our guests to come with a item that has meant something to them in their personal life or in their work life. What did you bring for us today?
Well, I brought this. This is our trophy from 2 years ago when we won what is called the first division. And you have the honorary division above that. That's what we're playing now because we won this one. And it isn't just, oh, we won a trophy. It's more like this is almost an embodiment of the collective effort that's been put in throughout the years. Starting, you know, looking back, starting a team with 4 people on the roster, having to figure out how to make these steps. How do I improve? How do I get the team to get better? To now having a good board. We have nice staff members. We have good coaches. We have a good culture. And then seeing players, you know, get rewarded with this and being a champion. You know, there's players on the team who told me, like, I've never won anything in my life, and now I've won something as a unit. You know, that's very important. And I think, you know, having something that embodies that is very key. And yeah, that's why this trophy means a lot.
Very fair. I think you spoke a lot about being very proud on the people side of it, but indeed having a consistent physical thing that doesn't go away must be very nice.
Yeah.
And deserved from what we hear.
Yeah, so. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you very much for listening to that episode of First Moves. If you want to connect with our guests personally, make sure to follow us on LinkedIn at First Moves. We also have an Instagram called First Moves Podcast.